Hello everybody and welcome back to week 3 of programming at The Forge, where we talk about strings. Let's get some basics out of the way first. Now strings, just like ints and floats, are a data type in Python. Now it might seem easy just to think of strings as, well, letters, where ints are numbers, strings are letters. That's a good way to start thinking about it, but it's not entirely accurate. The best way to think of strings is simply a string of single characters, whether that be a number or a letter or a special character like an exclamation point or question mark. In any case, any of these characters or any combination of these characters may be considered a string if it's surrounded by quotes. You can always tell a string if it's surrounded by quotes. That's either single quotes or double quotes. So just cement that in your brain now. Quotes, string, quotes, string. Your first program that you wrote 2 weeks ago, the Hello World program, that was a string. You used the print function and you printed the string Hello World. If you remember, you had to put those in quotes for it to work. If I were just to write print Hello World without quotes, it would be thinking that I'm referring to a variable that I declared somewhere called Hello World. And if you don't have a variable somewhere in your program called Hello World, it's not going to know what to do with it. Then you're going to get an error. But because you made Hello World a string of characters using quotes, it printed exactly that string of characters that you told it to. I mean, more often than not, you may just use some single line strings, but you can also write a string across multiple lines of code by using triple quotes. What quote is right? You can use single, double, or triple quotes. The easiest one to remember is the triple quote one though, because if you're ever gonna have a string that covers multiple lines, use triple quotes. Now let's talk about strings and how they relate to other data types. Let's say I have an int 50 and a string 30, right? You can tell it's a string because of the quotes. Strings do not have numerical value. In other words, this 30 is not actually 30 of anything, where this 50 actually represents 50 of something. It has numerical value. You'll see that if you ever try to add an integer or a float for that matter, both of which have numerical value, if you try to add an int or a float to a string or do any kind of math with a string, you're going to get an error because you can't add 50 of something to not really anything. In other words, you can't do math with strings. You can only do math with ints and floats, number data types. But like most things, there are little quirks. We can actually use the plus sign with strings, except it's not actually adding anything, so we don't call it the addition operator. What we call it when it's used with strings is actually the joining operator. And this act of joining two strings together is called concatenation. Right? It's a little bit of a big word, but an important one. Concatenation happens when you take one string and join it with another string to make one big string. For example, I could have the string hello, and I could also have the string world. These are two separate strings, but if I print the string hello joined with the string world, what will come out to the console is one string of all those characters, hello world. So that's concatenation, just joining strings together. Just be sure that you're really clear that you can't mix arithmetic with concatenation. In other words, you can't mix numbers and strings, just won't work. Another important thing to know about strings is that they are indexed, meaning that every character in a string is labeled by a specific index number, starting from the front with index 0 and moving to as long as that string is. Index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In the string hello world, H is at index 0, E is at index 1, L at index 2, L at index 3, O at index 4. Sometimes it's useful to refer to only certain characters of a string by its index number. So let's say I wanted to print just the E from this hello string. I would say print string hello, then we use the syntax of these brackets to indicate what index we want to print. In this case, I would say print string hello at index 1, which is the E. Another important thing about indexes is that there's not only positive index numbers. Okay, so from left to right, indexes go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as high as you want to go, right? But you can also count negative indexes in Python, and those go from right to left. So the last character in a string is actually index -1. It starts at -1, not at 0. And the next to last is -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, so on, until you get to the beginning again. The last thing about strings that I want you to know this week are what are called string methods. Now we'll dive into the details about the difference between methods and functions later on. For now, just know that methods are really just special functions that you can use under special circumstances. But the way we use methods is just a little bit different from functions. We can't just call the function name like we do with print or type, if you remember that one. We access methods through what's called the dot syntax, because you always use methods on some kind of data. Let's take a really easy one for example, the upper method. Now the upper method can be used on strings to make every character in them uppercase. So for example, let's take the string hello. You'll notice that it's all lowercase. Now I can print hello and it'll print just like I have it, all lowercase. But if I print the string hello dot upper, then I'm calling this upper method on this string. And so what will it print? It will actually print hello, all caps. What's important is to understand how you use methods through this dot syntax. Again, we'll go over the finer details of that later on, but there's no reason to keep you from being able to use these awesome string tools right now. Now there's a whole bunch of string methods out there, all of which do really cool and awesome things with strings. And even though we're not covering some real nitty-gritty things about strings this week, you'll be using strings so much throughout your programming this year that you're bound to pick up all those things just by happenstance. Hope you have plenty of fun with strings, and we'll see you next week when we jump into conditions and Boolean logic. See you in the Forge.